Right now, I want to bring in our contributor, MS Now contributor, Inzamam Rashid from Switzerland, Richard Haass, President Emeritus of the Council on Foreign Relations, and David Rohde, MS Now Senior National Security Reporter. Richard, let me start with you and just get your reaction to what we heard from Vice President Vance in his remarks there from Switzerland, and also his answer to some of the questions that were asked.
It was, shall we say, well, I don't mean to be disparaging. It was just extraordinarily positive compared to, I think, the reality. I think what we have here, Jonathan, is a situation that's not a peace. At best, it's a brittle, vulnerable ceasefire. There's any number of issues that can and will go wrong down the road in implementing this agreement. And just as an aside, I would add, it's a deeply flawed agreement. But in terms of moving forward, you've got, besides the absence of direct talks, you've got Israel and Lebanon, Israel and Gaza. You got questions about the Strait of Hormuz. The nuclear talks haven't even begun. There's the question of how much money is going to be returned to Iran and when, and on and on. So this is going to be the perils of Pauline going forward. And today is not an exception, but these kind of stops and starts are going to be the rule.
You know, Richard, I do want to stay with you because, you know, the vice president said a lot there. We heard from the prime minister of Pakistan and Qatar. When you hear, as someone who's been watching not just all of these foreign policy issues, but this one specifically, right? Middle East peace, the issues that Iran has caused the Middle East, according to a lot of folks. Do you see a deal coming out of, you know, J.D. Vance saying he might stay a day or two, based on what you heard today?
Well, again, the most you can get is not a deal, but a mini deal. You could maybe deal with one narrow part of it, maybe something on the Strait or something immediate on Lebanon.
Iranians have just gone into the room now.
Tomorrow. Richard, I just want to pause for 1 second. This is the Iranians, live pictures of the Iranians in Switzerland walking into the room where the rest of the delegation is sitting and waiting for them to come in. I think one of the interesting questions, Richard Haass, is why they came late. What kind of tea leaves should we be reading that they weren't there at the top of the press avail,
Look,
if any?
That could be anything. It might not want to appear with the Americans at some point. They might have wanted to see what we had to say. There may have been some internal issues on the Iranian side. But going back to your previous question, we have a deal. So the real question now is both the elaboration of the deal that exists and the implementation of the deal that exists. So again, there's every day there's going to be problems that are going to pop up. And, you know, again, we're not going to go back to full-scale hostilities because neither side wants them, but we don't necessarily move forward. There's going to be steps backward. And I think there's real questions about pressure on Israel. What the Iranians are clearly trying to do is exploit differences between the United States and Israel and use Israeli actions in Lebanon and Gaza, both to tie Israel's hands and to drive a wedge between the United States and Israel.
Richard, I know we have to let you go in 1 minute. Hopefully you have some fun Father's Day plans ahead. But I want to ask you about something else that Vice President mentioned during those remarks there, where he essentially downplayed the Lebanon part of this equation and said that tensions have settled and seems to imply that Israel is cooperating and abiding by some of the terms outlined in the agreement. Can you give us a fact check on that and where you sense things actually are?
Well, again, I'm not privy to the details, but I'd be surprised to be that optimistic. What happens if and when Iran demands, quote unquote, that Israel vacate Lebanon altogether? That Israel not go back into Lebanon. That is going to be something of a red line for Israel. And the question is, what does the United States do? Do we put pressure on Israel or do we tell Iran no way? So there's no way you can solve, quote unquote, the Lebanon issue once and for all. This has been an open problem for decades, and it's going to continue to be one of the many things that's going to really bedevil these negotiations going on.
All right, Richard Haass, thank you very much for jumping in front of a camera for us on this very important news day. And David Rohde and Inzamam Rashid are going to be sticking with us. Yeah, you're still with us. We're not going to break. Inzamam, let's bring you in here and give us the latest of what you know. And as you know, Eugene pointed out, as we were on the air, the Iranian delegation was arriving on the scene. What should we be looking out for now?
Yeah, that was a big question. Initially, this was supposed to be a quadrilateral meeting. So we were supposed to see in the room the Iranians, the US delegation, the Qataris and the Pakistanis. Now, we saw 3 of them, but we did not see the Iranian delegation. Now, just before the 3 leaders of Pakistan, the US and Qatar were speaking, the Iranian foreign minister actually went into that room. He met with the Pakistani Prime Minister, with the Field Marshal, General Asim Munir. There was a small conversation. We didn't pick up what that conversation was. It was whether the Foreign Minister was saying, look, we're not going to be part of this on-camera kind of briefing that they were giving, whether those were the words or not. And then he left the room. Then we saw the US Vice President come into the room. So there's a big question as to why Iran wasn't in the room when the leaders were all stood there taking questions from journalists and giving their remarks as well. Is it because Iran didn't want to be stood next to the US right now? Maybe they feel it's just too early. They're way too soon in the negotiations. They don't feel comfortable to be stood right next to the US right now. I think many people will see that as a concern. But then now, in the last few moments, we've seen the Iranian delegation with the Speaker of the Parliament, Mohammad Ghalibaf, Abbas Araghchi, the Foreign Minister, walk now into that room. And now what's going on inside that room is that the Qataris, the Iranians, the Pakistanis and the US delegation are all sat around a table, and they will now be having negotiations and discussions around the Memorandum of Understanding. Each country has come with their own concerns, and they'll be raising those points in that meeting room, and we'll try and get some more information as to what talks are going on right now.
You know, David, what I want to bring you in here, couldn't be higher stakes for our country, for the Middle East, for the world, but also for Vice President J.D. Vance, who is not a diplomatic negotiating expert, but the White House believes he is the best man for the job to get some kind of deal done here. One of the things that he said is that the Pakistani staff, Field Marshal Munir, he had talked to him more than anyone over the last few months, which leads me to believe, and based on what he's saying, the vice president, is that he has been maybe more involved behind the scenes than we have known. Do you have any reporting that suggests that the vice president has been doing a lot of talking to folks over the last few months, and we just haven't been privy to that?
I've spoken to one person, so I prefer to have 2 sources, but I can say that this one source who didn't want to be named, who has knowledge of this dynamic in the talks in general, J.D. Vance opposed this war, and President Trump, you know, is forcing him to be the face of these negotiations. And Vice President, you know, there was a senior, it was a senior administration official who said that essentially Vance feels he should contribute to what the administration is doing. We hear this across the administration. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says Donald Trump is the president. This is a Trump administration, and for some Republicans, this view of the president as all powerful, and you do what the president tells you, even if you disagree with it. And maybe he's disagreeing in private. Again, I've heard before the war, he repeatedly opposed this war. And so there's 2 questions. It is a danger for Vice President Vance's own political future. And why is President Trump putting J.D. Vance in this position and not Marco Rubio at all? I can't get in the president's head, but it is fair to say that Vance adamantly opposed this war, just adamantly opposed it in private. And he's now being forced to defend it and, frankly, solve it and even end the war.
There were talks that were scheduled a month or so ago that ended up getting canceled, and J.D. Vance was supposed to go on that trip. And what we were told at the time from lots of reporters was, you know, the Iranians wanted him at the table, partly because he did, as you said, David Rode, not want to go to war here. We'll keep following all of this. David Rode and Inzamam Rashid in Switzerland for us. Thank you both.